there was a local hotel. It was a Holiday Inn that I thought, this will be a great experience. I've always enjoyed hotels, and I think it's somewhere connected with the vacation space of actually getting to go on vacations rarely, but when we did, we were in a hotel. And so
Yeah.
taking care of people is something that comes pretty natural to me, and I love getting to be that person who takes life to a new elevated level for someone. So I've loved the hotel industry. It totally vacuumed me right up and sucked me in, and I ended up working for 3 of the biggest hotels here in Utah. But then also as I transitioned and moved with my partner as she was finishing her PharmD to Omaha, where I worked in a pretty large casino, the only 4-diamond hotel in the state of Iowa.
Oh, wow.
And then later at the Charles Hotel in Boston, in Cambridge. And so it was, it's been quite a ride. And I think I got beat up and spit out, and I absolutely loved it. And I look back, and they were still some of the best memories that I think really groomed me and helped me be both the successful person I feel like I am, but also a lot of failures that helped me better understand what I can do better.
I tell you what, there is so much. I have a background in the hospitality space also, and spent many years working in a restaurant. And then when I transferred over to marketing, I actually was a director of marketing for a large hospitality group also in the Midwest. Headquartered in Moline, Illinois, so right on the Iowa-Illinois border there. But I tell you what, and I didn't know it at the time, but I learned so much from that experience. And even what I do now, probably 10 or 15 years later, there are days where I'm like, oh, I know I learned that, and where I learned that and how I learned that. Like it sticks with you. It's really interesting.
It really does. And I think, we're having a conversation nationally right now about folks coming to the country. And I'm a huge supporter of giving people a chance to really look at how do you create yourself and sometimes recreate yourself. And I think hotels give people an opportunity to do that. I once upon a time on my staff, I think I had 44 languages. And so
Wow.
there's a space of being able to say, how do I cultivate, other people? But ultimately what's happening is they're also cultivating me. And
That's really cool.
for all of that. So it's been really great to be able to connect people.
So that's the restaurant background. How did you get involved in all of these other things, with municipalities, with education? Like, where did that come from for you?
As a very young kid, I was always taught volunteering and service, which is always a great thing. And so I started with a nonprofit now called the Inclusion Center for Community and Justice. It's based here in Salt Lake City, Utah.
Cool.
But they do a youth leadership program that essentially teaches people about diversity and inclusion, but how to be a leader outside of the leader box. What does inclusion really look like, and how to be able to do that, and conversations about racism and sexism and isms that are really in our life today. And so that kind of put me on a path of saying, I want to be a better human. I want to be a better person. I want to be a better leader. I want to be a better mentor. And how am I going to be able to do that? And so that path led me to everything from, working for some great mentors and having mentors from my scholastic years in public education all the way up to college, and certainly in the career area.
Yeah.
But I think ultimately it came down to just choosing a path that works. We happened to move to this beautiful town in Iowa called Malvern, a little jewel in the middle of nowhere. And
What's the biggest town next to it?
It's right outside, probably the next closest is Glenwood, and then Red Oak, Iowa. It's about 25 minutes from the Omaha metro area.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Western side.
Kind of, yeah, on the western side.
Okay.
I always say it's in the middle of nowhere, and it's in the middle of everywhere. Like there's so much happening in this little city. It's amazing. So we were able to start a nonprofit, and that nonprofit helped do a lot of good, and still to this day does. It also allowed us to, my partner she's Korean, and so for her to be a woman and to be a woman of color, the first person to work for our City on Fire, on our volunteer fire squad, for us to be able to do that, for me to be able to be voted in a city council. There's a lot of needs, I think, that are out there, and it's really fun to be able to help do whatever needs to be done in the community that is asking for it. So, It's
What
been
I
great.
love about this conversation is the topic is going for growth, right? But you're not only looking at growth for one organization or one company, you're looking at growth also as like how you can make bigger change and bigger impact. And I think that is a really cool lens and perspective to be looking through. Kudos to you. And thank you for doing the work you do. So how do you take this lens and get involved with something like Fear Factory? Like,
Well,
like where does that jump happen?
right? It really is such a jump. But once you hear the story, it'll make complete sense. So
Okay.
as my dad tells the story, I was probably 7, 8 years old, and essentially I didn't want to go trick or treating. I was like, this is kind of stupid. I'm just going to hang out in the bushes and scare people.
Okay. You sound like one of my kids.
Years. And it's, for me, it was a space of how do I do something that, I know that as a kid, I was having fun walking up to other homes that were decorated and kind of spooky. And that was enjoyable for me. So why not be the person who's creating that to make that joy happy for someone else? That's ultimately where it started. And from there, my dad, God bless him, said, well, why don't we build you a coffin and we'll build a little wolf mask and you can lay in the coffin and you can scare people. And it was downhill from there.
Yeah.
And
The
so
wolf mask did you in.
it totally did it. And now, we, my wife and I, we were in Omaha, or in the small town of Malvern. We had a cute little home haunt, and that home haunt, haunted houses are a short version of it is a haunt.
Okay.
So we decorated our yard, and people would come, and some people would give us donations that we just turned around and gave right back to our nonprofit. And we, in turn, were asked by the community to do a youth event as a nonprofit. And the youth said, well, we want to do a haunted house, and you just happen to have a whole bunch of stuff in your yard. Let's make it happen. And so we kind of went from small town Iowa to, for a couple of years, the haunted house was #1 in the state.
Oh,
We had
wow.
businesses that were on board, sponsors that were on board, people coming from all over the region. And we were really proud of it, and it was great. And we ended up pretty much giving it away, and we let them run it. They still to this day are working on some logistics of keeping it alive, because I think whenever you don't own your own building, it makes things a little tricky. But that moved us to eventually Boston, where I did some more work, and then here in Salt Lake. And Fear Factory reached out to me and said, hey, we'd like to have you on board. And I already had known about the family. The Dunfield family that owns it is spectacular. And here we are now, moving from a family business to really a full-fledged, one of the top haunted houses in the world, consistently ranked. And we're really proud of our team, and we put in a lot of work, and it's an awesome ride.
How many months out of the year does it take to prepare? Yeah, how many months does it take to prepare? I mean, it sounds like a really big undertaking.
It's huge. Most people think, oh, Lucky Spencer or Lucky Fear Factory, they only work 2 months out of the year.
Right, like 2 weeks, they're done. Like,
Yeah. We it couldn't be farther from the truth. Certainly, there are weeks where I'm probably putting in 10 or 15 hours on our very slow, dead, December, January, February. But then for the most part, most of the year is probably 30 to 40 hours. Even right now, we're starting to lead into that peak. I'm probably putting 45 to 50 hours in. And once we get into the fall, I joke about it, but it's very real. My wife is a single parent for 2.5 months. And it's hard for our families. It's hard for our staff, for our actors, our volunteers, our interns. Everyone really gives so much to be part of this fun. And it pays off. It's a lot of fun. We really enjoy it.
well, and I think people forget that there's so much business operation that goes into that. Just what you were mentioning with staffing, with getting sponsorships, advertising, promotion, all of that. So I'd love any insight that you have for making that scalable. Like, how do you get sponsorships at that level, or how do you manage a project at that level?
It is tricky. It's really tricky. Thank goodness I was able to take a business degree paired with HR and be able to pull those together to say, how can I kind of move this into a new area?
Yeah.
Corporate background, along with my nonprofit background, allowed me to build a sponsorship packet that still to this day I meet with sponsors, and just the other day, I met with an executive VP of one of our big banks here, and he said, I've been doing marketing for 30 years. I've never seen a sponsorship deck that's this elaborate, that's this beautiful. And I'm thankful for it. I think it's great, but it also shows, for us, we're creating a show that really is unlike anything else. And we have staff who give up their lives, they give up jobs. We're really proud of it, and it really isn't, sure, it's a business, and yes, it's, it's a venture of, how do we make money, but it really is family. It really is a space of how do we do things. I'm working with a sponsor right now of saying, how do I, we have folks that have certain needs, whether it's unemployment or it may be health needs, financial needs. And I'm working with sponsors to be able to say, you have something that we need to make our staff better. And we're willing to give you the marketing for that if you're willing to help us create some really great space for our team.
That's
and
smart.
we have staff who, even the haunted house back in Iowa, we had staff who I still to this day talk to, close to, what are we at, 7-8 years now, where the time in their life where they found a space where the general public and society didn't really care who they were or what they felt or didn't validate them. They were suicidal, they were unhappy, maybe things at home weren't great. And we give them a space of being able to say, you're okay here, we're all a little bit weird, and that's all right.
And that's so awesome.
Yeah, and we still do that today. I think we all want a space where we can be who we are, and haunts have a very strange way of doing that. And that really allows me to take the business side and the nonprofit world of creating inclusion into a very neat space where we're really proud of what we've been able to create.
And I think your hospitality background fits right into that too.
Absolutely.
Isn't it so interesting? And I think there's either a podcast or a book about this, but it's always so easy to look back on your journey and connect the dots in that way. But sometimes when you're in, and I have a very nonlinear sort of path too, but when you're in that and you're making these decisions and changes, it kind of feels like, oh, this is never going to work out. And this is too far of a stretch from where I was. And then you get to where, you're going for that time period and you're like, oh, that all makes sense. All the dots are connected.
Yeah, I think life has a really cruel way of giving you little hints.
Yeah.
And if you don't listen to those hints, then it breaks the dam and, it gets really ugly really fast. And being able to say, cool, I've got my floaties on, let's go for a ride. And sometimes it's ugly and you hit your head against a rock as you're floating down the river, but eventually you're right. You look back and you say, I can't believe this path took me here, and thank goodness it did.
Yeah. And what I think about those little hints is, in my experience, if you don't listen the first time, it comes back again, and it comes back bigger. And if you don't listen that time, it comes back bigger until you finally listen to one of those little hints. It's awesome.
Yeah. I consider myself a little bit of a hippie, and I think in that space, I believe that life is really about a cycle, and it's, we all have our ups and we have our downs, and that creates a circle. And as we're looking at that on a linear path, we have those ups and downs, and the reality is they are going to come back if we don't, because we have to learn that lesson in order for us to go wherever in the world we're going. So
exactly. I love it. So as we wrap up, my last question is about, what's on your radar? What are you seeing as maybe an industry trend or a hot topic that you think we'll all be talking about here pretty soon?
An industry trend from the haunt side of things. From a haunt side, from a nonprofit side, from a corporate side, I think there's a lot of angles. From the haunt perspective, I was saying this years ago, and people said, "Oh, you're absolutely crazy." Which was looking at virtual reality within a haunted house. Why would someone spend $2 or $3 million for a property when they could spend $200,000 on software, put on some goggles, and charge someone $10?
Oh, wow.
And we're now seeing that virtual reality happen full steam ahead. But then the second part to that is augmented reality, where we're now seeing where folks can walk through a space and see something on their screen or on goggles that is essentially augmented, where it's there in the real world, but something else is happening. It could be something scary or a sound or objects moving. And so it's pretty exciting to see where we're going from that perspective. And I think from a national perspective, we're part of the Haunt Attraction Association, and what they're doing on an international level with over 5,000 haunted houses across the world is pretty exciting. So we're excited for the future.
I love how technology is truly just creeping into every industry and disrupting in some regard. Like that is not, I had just never thought how technology could play into haunted houses, right? Like in my mind, haunted houses are just what they always are. There's the scary guy with the chainsaw. There's, you know, the mummy that pops out of somewhere. But that's a really cool insight. Thanks for sharing that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's true. We use technology more than most people now. It's a lot.
Well, and you guys, don't you use like lasers too? I feel like there's a lot of lasers these days.
Yep. Yeah, we'll use, even from a show perspective, you've got plenty of lasers, but even on the back end, you have everything from, we need a speed on Wi-Fi of a bandwidth because we're running essentially 45,000 people through within 40 days. And it's a lot when you're spending a couple of hours on site at an attraction, and the bandwidth that's needed, the technology that's needed, the iPads that are needed, the software that integrates all of it. Like, it's a lot. It's a lot.
That's really cool. Thanks for being here, Spencer. That was fun.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.